And what they did is they called out and reached out to what they call the 33rd Civil Support Team, who has the ability to do field analysis work. Very, very sensitive equipment. They can go in and do very quick samples of air, soil, water. Can't give us what the actual compounds and related to it is, but can give us an idea there's a problem. And generally speaking, that's because the technology's improved so much today, where 5 or 10 years ago, things would come up as a non-detect. They can actually get very, very minute concentrations and identify the substance, but maybe not know what the substance is. So what happened was around noon, give or take, we get a call. They took a couple of samples of the water in one of the buildings, and they identified what they called a petroleum-based substance. They didn't know what the substance was other than it was a petroleum-based substance. And we immediately deployed our drinking water division. Generally speaking, these things happen, not in the water system, but they happen in buildings, large buildings, where if you're doing work on heating systems, a plumber, they can actually set up a cross connection. But there's what they call these backflow assemblies, and I don't want to get into the technical terms, but it prevents it from actually getting into the water distribution system, and it'll be limited to a building. So what we do is we deploy our inspectors out there to go check the building. As part of one of the samples, we had them check one of the hydrants, and now that's the distribution system itself. The building is one thing. When you're on the hydrants, that's the actual mains into the street. And they detected what they called a petroleum-based substance. They didn't know what it was, other than it was petroleum-based, and we don't use any petroleum-based anything in the water distribution system for treatment. So obviously at that point in time, DDOE was the lead agency at the time because they were responding to a hazmat solution. Now we have a potential water problem, and a very real water problem. So we took over as the lead agency for this response, and I was the incident commander for the entire operation. So that's why I said I would come today. I'm sorry the emails got a little confused, because when I came in I said I'll go. Somehow that did. That's a side conversation. Anyways, what we did at that point in time is I brought EPA in. I brought an agency called ATSDR, which is actually an agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Register. They're actually not associated with CDC, but they do tie in with CDC. To identify if, in fact, we did have a contamination in the water system is very, very serious, obviously, because it can impact everybody. We immediately brought in, I literally deployed probably in the vicinity of 150 people. And this is in the afternoon between shift changes, so that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, that was very serious.
Very serious.
They opened the fire hydrants.
Yes.
But, that's, we didn't know what to do. They say get water, don't drink the water.
Right.
I thought it was a reservoir problem.
Right.
That's dangerous.
No, I completely agree. We don't minimize this at all. This was a danger. This is why we escalated this immediately. We, as the lead agency, we take control of this, obviously, because it's in the distribution system, but we brought federal agencies in, district agencies in, because it's a big problem. DC Water is a very large system. Obviously, we're supplying water to 600,000 customers. Now, within DC Water and that big water distribution system, we have it set up so they're kind of like little water distribution systems, because we actually don't have one big system that circulates water. But we can isolate, and it does. We have what we call pressure zones. And a pressure zone within the DC Water system is like, if you think of it as like its own little water company. So we have a pressure zone for this area. We have a pressure zone for, we call them highs. First high, second high, third high, fourth high, low service. And then we have east and west. So we have 7 different pressure zones. So what we did, we identified a substance. Nobody could tell us what it was. They didn't know what the concentration was. So I can't sit here and tell you if it was 1 part per billion or 55 gallons per 100 gallons. I just couldn't tell you. All they could tell me was we don't know what the concentration is. It has the characteristics, because that's how it was quoted. It has the characteristics of a petroleum-based compound, and they believed it was some type of a solvent, and that's what it was. And actually, they used the term WD-40 because that's what it smelled like. So I'm going, well, this is great. So what we did is literally deployed crews opening up the hydrants to identify. We had to do a smell test. There is no magic. They literally, I'll explain the sampling process later. But we sent crews out to all of the hydrants in the area just to see if this unusual odor came into the water system. And that's how we started defining a large boundary and then moving it into a smaller boundary. We recommended, and obviously EPA is going to approve, that we issue a do not drink. That came from us. because we didn't know what we were dealing with, and the last thing we want to do is cause health risk to any of the customers that we deal with. So we made the recommendation. Everybody obviously agreed, because nobody knew what we were dealing with. And in all honesty, I thought whatever the problem was, we would have it tied up by 11 o'clock the next morning, and I'll explain why in a minute. But anyways, we isolated, we identified, and then I had to gather everybody, because once we do that, they have what they call regulatory-wise a Tier 1 notice, which means they have to hand-deliver notices to all of the impacted people. So we literally, 100 and I think it was 130 people, actually from 4 o'clock in the afternoon up to midnight. And then we had to come up with a plan to flush the entire system, basically bring clean water in from our big mains into the area to flush out whatever may be in there, and then figure out what was going on. So we developed that, we tied in, and we had sampling people that we triggered it to be done at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we actually had samplers out here at 5 o'clock in the morning, in addition to the police and other people that would support us, to actually transport those samples, one to Dale Collier, who's Washington Aqueduct is our EPA certified lab, and also to Fort Meade, because we needed a laboratory that could actually analyze for chemical compounds, water quality compounds and not chemical compounds. And reaching out, there's nobody locally in the district. We actually looked at a contract lab in Baltimore and made arrangements with them. But we reached out to Fort Meade because the EPA's lab out there is certified to handle this type of thing. So,
Did you
What'd you find
identify
out?
the cause and also?
now that's, no. What happened was, I'm not finished, I just wanted to answer your question. What happened was is that when Fort Meade started analyzing the samples, this was now Thursday afternoon. On Thursday morning, we had anticipated getting an all clear that something may have contaminated the system. To be honest with you, for the first time in my experience, and I've been here 12 years. But we brought all the fresh water in, cleaned it out, and we expected to get an all clear. And then the Fort Meade laboratory indicated that there was a heavy motor oil consistency. This is what was described to us, compound. But they didn't have a concentration level, and they couldn't tell us what it was. And I'm going from 1 minute we're going to a WD thing to now we're talking about sludge. And I'm going, well, isn't this exciting? So at 11 o'clock, we expected to be able to lift the do not use at 11 o'clock on Thursday. Now I have Fort Meade telling me they don't know what the issue is or what the substance is. However, we're seeing this. And so we had to continue that and come up with a whole new plan, which we did the next evening. And then on Friday morning, we basically got it wasn't Friday morning actually, it was closer to the afternoon, but we got an indication from Fort Meade and also from the Washington Aqueduct that whatever that substance was now gone, and that the water was safe to drink. And we lifted the thing at 4 o'clock. And that's a very, very quick summary of what happened now.
Was that after you flushed it, that it was all gone?
We flushed it a second. We flushed it a second time. The issue I have, and the issue and the concerns that people are going to ask me in a minute, is that we do not have the results of what they found yet, which is kind of, this meeting is kind of premature for us, only in the fact that we asked Fort Meade to do a forensic analysis for us, but because we're dealing with a number of federal agencies, we haven't got the actual final results of whatever substance they were looking at on the 17th, because that's when this had actually taken place. Yes, sir.
The only reason why I asked you whether you determined the cause, because this could happen again. So that would be my concern.
It's our concern too. We've been out to 120 locations here within this area, looking at big buildings, construction sites, abandoned oil. We had an issue yesterday similar to what happened 2 weeks ago, where our inspector actually stumbled, quote stumbled, and I'd ask the residents to look for this too. Apparently they were draining an above-ground storage tank in someone's backyard on U Street, and apparently there was some spill, and apparently they decided to wash it into the storm basin. So we started getting calls for a 6-block area of that same quote problem because it got into the sewer system. So I totally agree with you. First of all, I don't know how it couldn't get into the system, because it's not an easy thing to do. I'm not going to say it's impossible, because we all know that anything can happen. But it's very, very difficult to contaminate a distribution system. It's very difficult for me to sit here and tell you that this can't happen again if I don't know what I'm dealing with. And to be frank with you, at this point in time, I don't. You know, if I had some results from, which I'll eventually get, probably in the next week or two, where we can actually know what we were dealing with and whether or not there was even a contamination on that second set of samples, then I can sit here and talk to you intelligently about what could have happened and where we could look. Right now, we're looking, it's like a needle in a haystack, literally. We visited over 120 sites, basically looking for some type of a cross connection. We don't think something was deliberate, but it can happen. I'm not going to say it cannot, but it's very, very difficult to make it happen. Because if you think about it, the water system is highly pressurized, and to actually push it back and force something into the system, it's not an easy thing to do. It really takes some other incident or event to take place to actually for that to happen.
So you're expecting to get results from, if I've got this right, from Fort Meade within the next 3 weeks?
I'm dealing with federal agencies,
I'm
so I'm
sorry.
expecting to get results. But
From what federal agency are you dealing with?
for me, right now, which is EPA certified lab. But they're also going to be go ahead.
Okay, well, as I just said, you
Uh-huh.
were dealing with Fort Meade, whether that's a federal agency or Fort Meade.
No.
When do you anticipate getting some sort of results?
I'm anticipating getting some results in mid-January.
Will you forward those results to the community, or will you come back?
No, we will gladly come back when we know what we actually were dealing with in
Okay.
this particular instance. And again, because we had so many different federal agencies involved, that a lot of people are going to be reviewing this data. What I can say is I don't have it right now. So,
Excuse me.
yes.
It was you all who found when you guys went into the sewer system. You guys found a big clog. I think it happened the same day you guys found that in the substance in the water. You guys poured out a lot of substances out of the ground, and it was just in a big clog. They said I think it was like a lot of grease and stuff.
Oh, yeah, grease can happen in the sewer system. Generally speaking, it's, somebody dumped, no different than the oil I just described that happened yesterday. Somebody dumped something they weren't supposed to into the sewer system, and it will eventually coagulates and will cause a backup. And it also can happen if you just dump oil. Anybody cooking grease and things of that nature, if you dump it down your drain, eventually it goes through pipes and it keeps gathering, and over the many years it will accumulate. And that's what you found there. At the same time that this incident occurred, we also had a water main break in the area, and Washington Gas was also had apparently a gas main break at the same time. So, as I said, it's not easy to introduce a substance into the distribution system. As a matter of fact, it's very, very difficult to do that. So if I could sit here and tell you intelligently what they actually found, because I can't, I'm going to use this as an example, but, just take it for what it's worth. Arsenic, we all know, is a poison. Arsenic is also naturally in the environment. If, in fact, they detect arsenic in the water, if you can't tell what the concentration is, then it may not be poison. And I'm only using that as an analogy because, they said we found a petroleum-based compound in a couple of the samples we took, but they couldn't tell us what the concentration was. Is it 1 part per billion, which is equivalent to a dot in an Olympic swimming pool? Or as I said, is it a heavy concentration that somehow been introduced? And if it was a heavy concentration that somehow been introduced, then I would be looking outside of just an accident type of thing. That would be more deliberate. And those things are not easy to do within the system. They really aren't. You need a number of factors for that to occur. And I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody what they are, but it really is.
Makes people sick though, so.
Most definitely.
Makes people sick and it kills people.
I completely agree. We took, actually, once we were alerted of the issue, as I said, we were the ones that came up with the do not use. We told EPA this is what we're doing. We notified all of the customers, because again, we don't know what we're dealing with, and the safety of the public is the most important concern for us.
I guess that was an issue. Living in the neighborhood, I lived south of the actual line there. The first notice I heard was from a neighbor tweeting out a message that there was a problem. Okay, now, even though I didn't live exactly in the area, where you guys knocked on doors, it's sort of important to know, one, because, well, I guess, let me go. It's important for us to know because, for example, didn't you increase the area that was an area concerned?
Yes.
See, and so, could have been my neighborhood, right?
No, I guarantee you if it was an area that we
Well,
identified.
then you would have knocked on my door.
Oh, we
yourself.
definitely would have knocked on it.
Okay.
Well, what we did is, and again, I understand, we have senior citizens, and everything dealing with. Our call center handled literally hundreds of calls that night. Am I in the impacted area? We did publish a map that was an interactive map, type an address and see if you fit. But because it becomes a tier 1 notice, when you have a boiled water alert or a do not drink or anything of that nature, we also have to go out and literally knock on the doors and hand deliver these things, which is what we did.
Okay, so but-
And we marshaled that very quickly.
And I guess that's your responsibility, not like you mentioned the environmental department, the
It's-
DC environment, or
We had a lot of support from a lot of different agencies, we really did, but at the end of the day, right, the customers of DC Water are the most important thing that we have, so we take that, that is our responsibility. I mean, don't get me wrong, of course, if I can reach out and get 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 or 200 people to help in that process, I'll gladly take them. But that was our call, and it needed to be done.
Sir, you have 2 minutes,
Okay.
please.
And I've got questions for you.
Sure.
So, some of the biggest concerns that I heard from folks were, how does DC Wassa expect me, a senior or a disabled person, to walk 5 blocks to go get water, because you were providing water on the 600 block of O Street,
Right.
instead of bringing the water to me?
Mhm.
So I ask you,
Sure.
that, and I know that, Director, Hawkins on the afternoon that the warning was lifted, specifically said, we needed to have taken the water to those folks that we knew, were unable to access that water.
Earlier. Yes.
Well, go ahead.
No, that's what he said. What it is as our responsibility is dealing with the distribution system. In retrospect, hindsight being 20/20, if I had brought the district in earlier in the afternoon of the previous day, because I honestly anticipated that whatever the issue was, when we did all of that activity on Wednesday night, Kevin, into Thursday morning, that although we may not identify what the problem was, the water itself would be clean. Actually, every expectation that was going to happen. What should happen, and what didn't happen, is I should have called the district earlier, because there is a lead agency for supplying water. It is not DC Water, but there is a lead agency within our emergency response plan in the district. And if the district can't do it, then it carries into the federal government. Now, I did make that calls the next morning, Friday morning. We set up temporary, and we did actually deliver some water to some senior residents that we knew had problems, and they had contacted us, and we did deliver it. But I'm not going to sit here and say we were heroes in this. It was a mistake, because we should have done it. Never mind, probably should have did it a day early. But in answer specifically to the question, once we roll up as part of our emergency response and IMT, which is our team, I should have brought the district in on Thursday afternoon, and then we could have coordinated that activity. But it still wouldn't happen until probably Friday morning.
So
It's
I know-
not like
I know Ms.
it's not like
Mitchell-
DC Water has 10 million bottles sitting, because we really don't. Yes.
I was out, I only heard about that on television.
Mm-hmm.
My office didn't get any notification. And I learned later when I went over to the truck, by the subway.
O Street, yeah.
Yes, you had a big operations truck, and I got a hold of someone who called the intergovernmental interagency folks. And apparently the problem was, they didn't realize this was part of Ward 6. They thought it was still part of Ward 2. So we had to update that, and so then we were able to talk to them about it, and I checked with Alex as well as to who were the most vulnerable senior buildings. To say, shouldn't you be delivering water out there? I mean, as opposed to just telling people, don't drink. I mean, it was the question of, could seniors afford to go buy all that water? No. I mean, could they afford to, could they carry it? No.
Right.
And so, you got it out, but as Alex said, the wrong place. And I think you got comments, why would you put it on O Street when the people up there are? So at any rate, we all learned some lessons there about communicating. And
Right.
So that Alex and I talked, and we thought you all would get the water
Yeah.
to those senior buildings.
I just, and again, this comes back to a larger response. It's not just when we have these emergencies, it's not just DC Water that's part of this. And again, in all honesty, I should have made that call early. I should have made it in the afternoon of Thursday. I can't guarantee that water would have got delivered on Thursday evening, but it clearly would have got delivered earlier than Friday morning.
Well, I think if the intergovernmental guy was correct.
Yes, it was, because
You might
what
have
had
got-
happened was, is that we're sitting here, I'm not making excuses, it's just the fact, right? They had all of the resources that are under my control were working on the emergency of getting the distribution system clean. It's not like I have 500 other people ready to lift cases of water and drive them around the district. And we do have emergency response people to handle this, outside of DC Water's, because it's not part of the DC Water agency at this point in time. It's bringing in the rest of the district agencies to assist in this process. But it also, if the district agencies can't handle, then it carries over to the feds. But in any case, it wouldn't have been DC Water, which is all I'm really saying. The phone call would have been DC Water, but the actual delivery of that would not have been DC Water. And if the district can respond quicker, they would, and if they can't, then it would carry over to the federal as part of our emergency response.
You're absolutely right, because I did call Homeland
Yes.
Security and notified them as to what they should be doing.
Mhm.
And apparently they did absolutely nothing. Whereas in other instances we've had in this area where, like on North Capitol, you know, they lost heat or something, electricity,
Mm-hmm.
how they, Homeland Security came straight in, you know, helped with water, got a
Yeah.
bus there for cooling, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think we need to follow up with.
Well,
what
I
happened.
don't want to punt, I really don't want to punt this down the field, literally. No, seriously, because
We
the,
want to learn what we should do.
yeah, and it's part of our after action report, which I think was what George had communicated, right, things that we learned too. In all honesty, right, we're so concentrated on handling the problems in the distribution system. We did, people contacted us and we made some side deliveries to some people, senior citizens that notified us in certain buildings. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was hundreds of the entire ward, it wasn't. But they did reach out to us and we made arrangements to do that. And we did set the water buffalo up and alerted people to do it. But in hindsight being 2020, we should have got the other agencies involved quicker. Once we learned Thursday afternoon this wasn't cleaned up, that in fact we should have got them to deliver water. It was the first call we made Thursday night, to be honest with you. And then it was a citywide call early the next morning, which was Friday morning. And the number one objective on that was get to water because we're getting near the 48 hours now. So
Lady in the
that
red.
call should have been 12 hours early. Yes, ma'am.
My question is this, and it's more direct. It's the very first thing, in fact, that crossed my mind when this emergency occurred, and that is this. What if the sound of alarm had not been a smell? What if this had been a substance that was very deadly, but was tasteless, odorless? Would the sound of alarm have been several people dropping dead? Because this is what crossed my mind. They were going on a smell, a bad smell that people were experiencing.
Right.
What if this had been a different kind of substance that was deadly and had absolutely no taste,
Mm-hmm.
no smell,
It,
and yet would have
right.
literally killed
It is a concern. I'm not going to pretend it's not. It is a concern. It comes down to the means of introduction. As I said, it's not an easy thing to introduce a substance, any substance, within a fully charged distribution water main system. It's not an easy thing to do.
But
There
you
are other
saying that
events.
there's a possibility that it can happen? Because you said it's not easy.
Well, I can't sit here and take, in terms of things of certainty, we've learned a long time ago that anything's possible. I mean, but the way the distribution system is set up, it's not, you can't contaminate the whole system because we're like 8 little water companies making one big water company within the distribution system. However, if something did get introduced that was toxic or something of that nature and was undetectable or something, it would be, how did it get introduced, first of all, would be the first question I would have. But could it be detected? No, there is no magic system out there that's monitoring every single time. We monitor the distribution system more so than most water utilities, if not all water utilities. We don't just do the minimum EPA requires, we do everything and then plus. So in terms of the DC water and the district residents, we sample the distribution system more than anybody. But if something crazy should happen in the future, and somebody was able to introduce some type of substance in the system, I can't give assurance that can never happen. It'd be very difficult. But could it happen? I don't know. I don't know of a situation. I've been here 13 years, And this is the first time,
Last question, Linda?
yeah,
So just,
that we've dealt with this type of concern. Yes.
when you said delivering cases of water, when you have an emergency like this, you're not delivering bottles of water, small bottles of water, are you? You're delivering large amounts of water or small bottles of water?
No, what they do is, literally, the district will set aside 12 or 16 ounce bottles, cases of them, and they would bring cases to the buildings.
Well, you know, when you need water like that, you need more. I'm just gonna make
Yeah.
a suggestion,
Mhm.
that, you know, all those little bottles of water, people need a lot of water, you
Right.
know, seniors and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So, I mean, it's just not as efficient
Right.
as it would be, even when I go to the store, I buy a 2-gallon thing.
Right.
And, I mean, you need it for a day.
Mhm.
So, you know, 2
Yeah.
bottles or 6 bottles
Yeah.
and you deliver, I'm just saying,
No.
for the, you know, and never know, because it could be
Right.
any kind of thing. But I think you should get away from the bottles and give more water than that. And it would also be easier to deliver than all those little bottles.
The easiness to deliver, carrying around large jugs are going to be complicated too. What we do
But
is
you
we
can
bring
deliver them
cases.
quicker into the building. You know, and, you know, people just have all the water. You know, you can't take a 16-ounce bottle of water and flush a toilet or, you know, just, you know.
In all honesty, I'm thinking of going up to a building that has maybe 300 or 400 residents in the building. And we're going to go to, think about,
Days.
no, just carrying jugs of water for 300 residents. They literally bring cases, in cases. So it's not here, everybody gets one bottle. They bring cases to
Everybody
buildings.
gets a case.
Well, I don't know how much they get distributed.
saying you
It
guys
gets,
know.
it gets
I just-
delivered to it'll get delivered to the property manager who would distribute the water to the people in the residence.
I think other things that we should be recognizing, Safeway at the corner of L and New York Avenue, when they heard about this incident, they brought water from a lot of their other stores to
A lot of water.
here, to this area, so that people who wanted to go in and purchase water could. So that there were people in the community as well who were working on the
Right.
water situation. So there was a lot of camaraderie within the community for the incident.
And again, I'll gladly come back here. If I had some real information to share in terms of what we were actually dealing with, you know, I would love to talk to you and talk to you about that. What I will say is that we, on 2 different occasions, on Thursday, we got this notification that this substance was in the water. And on Friday, we get a notification that it's a different substance in the water. And so I can't honestly, that's why I'm sitting here, you know, I hate stumbling. I like to just come here and be confident and tell you what's going on. I went from some type of a, quote, solvent petroleum-based chemical on Thursday to sludge. And I can tell you right now, getting sludge into the distribution system is impossible. You know, just think about it. You know, it was described to me as a consistency of something sitting around in an underground storage tank for years. And I'm going, come on, give me a break. You know, what am I actually dealing with at this time? So that's the story that went from this indication on Thursday to this indication on Friday. What became very clear on Friday as they continued to analyze the samples, that they were able to dismiss the petroleum-based substance on Friday afternoon, and basically all the work we did for whatever was in the system on Thursday night was now clear, and whatever was there is now gone. And that every agency that we were dealing with concurred that anything that was there is now gone, except I'm sitting there going, trying to answer people and saying, well, what was there? And I'm saying, well, gee, I would really like to know myself. And
how did it get there?
that's the most important question, because again, if you think about the distribution system, think about your hand and that big nozzle in front of the hydrant. You're not going to stop that water from coming out because you start your hand in. Well, it'd be the same thing in trying to introduce something into a distribution system. You have to overcome all that head of pressure in that system to actually do that. That is not an easy thing to do. It's actually a very, very complicated and difficult thing to do. And the residents would know that was happening. If you see somebody fooling around with a hydrant and it's not part of the fire department and it's some, you know, Joe Schmo from wherever, or like the incident yesterday, I'm sure a number of people observed them dumping the oil into the sewer system that live on L Street. I mean, there's, you know, if you see that type of stuff, call and report it. Because for all intents and purposes, we were dealing with the same situation yesterday that we had 2 weeks ago, this odor and smell in the water system, and it ended up being somebody had dumped oil into the sewer system. So again, if you see those types of things, call us, 612-3400. We investigate these things, we never close. And we're very serious about this. And again, we take every precaution to safeguard you, because the most important, I mean, that's what we're here to do, so.
So the last thing that,
Yes.
you know, that people are still asking, and obviously you don't have the answer yet, but we're hoping that you'll have an answer soon, is, you know, what are the potential long-term health impacts of exposure to this as yet undetermined level on seniors, people with compromised
Sure.
immune systems, children, pets? And, you know, also, I've had a number of people ask, why did they not take into consideration that contaminated water was being, you know, released onto the street, potentially spreading that contamination, you know, even further?
Well, in terms of that particular instance here, what we're dealing with was a petroleum-based compound in a very, very minute quantity, and that water that's going to the street is going back into the system. And that's part of the combined area, so that is going back to the treatment plant. So we did consider that. It wasn't that we're just dumping this stuff and sending it to the river. In terms of a toxic substance, it was never described to us as a toxic substance. What it was described to us was there's a petroleum-based compound. Plastic is a petroleum-based compound, but their detection system, they actually came from the civil support team, not from the laboratory, detected this substance or compound. And we had to basically respond to what they were telling us. So they did their job, they're giving us information, and the most important thing that they didn't have for us was what concentration are we dealing with? You know, again, because the level of detection today is very, very, very small. And since we don't know what the concentration is, we don't know what risk there was. And since we didn't know what risk there was, we didn't want you drinking water. So.
I thank you very much,
All
sir,
right.
for your time and being able to
I will gladly
patiently
come
ask.
back.
We will ask you back, and we will hope that when you have results, I'll take that from you, that when you have results, you'll be able to let us know so that we can invite you
Sure.
and anyone who is involved in the results of that study, that we can get some definite answers to that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
We
much.
appreciate that. Next on the agenda is the Dollar Plus Saving request for comments on a proposed Great Street and Small Business Capital. Are those folks here? Hi.
Hi.
No, if you want to speak, that's fine.
Hi.